What's going on, guys? Welcome to a new thing that we're trying here on the channel. What I'm going to be doing is going through and talking about some of the top threats in the VGC16 metagame to try and help you understand it a little better and also give you some ideas as to how to counter it if you're struggling with in team building. So today I thought we'd start off the series by talking about something that is a very controversial topic in VGC16, which is Smeargle. So for those of you who don't know, Smeargle is a Pokemon that in the past hasn't given us a lot of trouble because of the fact that in other metagames, Smeargle wasn't really as much of a problem because for a while Dark Void, which is Smeargle's signature move, Darkrai's signature move, but Smeargle's the only Pokemon that learns it legally in the VGC16 format. And as it's a signature move and is really overpowered, or it's really powerful, I don't know if it's overpowered, people are having a lot of trouble with it, and they're not happy because Smeargle is a Pokemon with a lot of unpredictability associated with it. So for those of you who don't know a lot about Smeargle, Smeargle's signature thing is it gets a move called Sketch, which lets it learn any move in the game, like any move in the game, every single move in the game, but only 4 at once, which is at least nice. So Smeargle's something that's really threatening. It gets the Moody ability, which raises one of its stats by 2 levels at the end of every single turn at the cost of lowering one of its stats by 1 level. But the fact of the matter is, since Smeargle doesn't need its attacking stats and it doesn't really need its defensive stats, a speed, accuracy, or evasion boost even can really swing the game and make Smeargle even harder to deal with. So Dark Void is really a scary move. It puts both of the opponent's Pokemon to sleep with an 80% accuracy to hit each individual Pokemon, and people just struggle a lot with it, and it's not very well liked. And also it doesn't help the fact that because of the fact that the format has so many high-powered Pokemon, and a lot of these Pokemon, like Groudon, Kyogre, and Xerneas specifically, and also Mega Evolutions, they can't hold an item. They have to hold their signature item. Xerneas technically can hold an item, but it almost always chooses to run Power Herb because it's the best item on Xerneas, I think. And so because of that, you can't just run Lumberry on stuff which stops sleep, and so that's one of the reasons why Smeargle is really threatening this format. So yeah, Smeargle is a scary Pokemon, and people are really struggling with it. So I just thought I'd talk about what my understanding of Smeargle. This isn't like I'm not a Smeargle expert by any means, but this is my thoughts on how you can beat it. So like basically, when you're talking about Smeargle, you have to like look at what Smeargle is going to do, right? So normally the most common Smeargle set is a Focus Sash variant with Spiky Shield, Dark Void, Follow Me, and a choice of any of a number of moves in the last slot. It normally runs Wide Guard, Crafty Shield. Fake Out I think is the most common option, but it has lots of options, obviously, learning every single move in the game. It can also learn Transform, and I think that's most of the main moves that you'll see on Smeargle. But the fact of the matter is, part of the reason why Smeargle is so scary is that you have to play very differently against the Focus Sash variant than you do against a Mental Herb or a Choice Scarf, especially like a Surprise Choice Scarf variant can just do a ton of damage to a team because of the fact that it can put 2 Pokemon to sleep very quickly if you lack the appropriate means to counter it. So I think what's actually really important when talking about Smeargle is actually looking at its partners. And so I don't have a ton of partners here because I thought I'd list the most threatening. And so the reason why I think this is actually like an extremely essential part of the discussion about Smeargle is the fact that like you can't just look at Pokemon in a vacuum, right? That's something that I used to do in the past, and it's something that doesn't actually work because when we're playing VGC, you're not just looking at Pokemon in a vacuum, right? You're saying, okay, yeah, like I have Taunt, I beat Smeargle, but it doesn't really matter if you taunt the Smeargle if in return you let the Xerneas set up and you've done nothing to it and now it sweeps your whole team, right? So the most threatening partner, in my opinion, to Smeargle is Xerneas because Smeargle offers a really wide range of support. It can run Fake Out and Follow Me and also Wide Guard, as well as Crafty Shield and even Transform. As well as Dark Void, like a Dark Void on top of all that. So basically, like the Smeargle Xerneas lead is one that's seen an extremely large amount of success in the season thus far. It like dominated Virginia regionals. It's like an essential part of the Big Six archetype, and yeah, it's just very scary. So when you're thinking about Smeargle, you have to think not only how do I beat Smeargle individually, but how do I beat Smeargle while also preventing its partners from doing what they're trying to do. So just think about that a little bit when you're thinking like in your team building, like okay, what am I going to do versus Smeargle Xerneas lead? What am I going to do versus Smeargle Groudon, Smeargle Mence, Smeargle Kangaskhan, right? So yeah, that's something that's really important. Also, another common partner that I've observed is Kangaskhan because of the fact that Kangaskhan puts on a lot of Fake Out pressure. It puts on pressure with Fake Out, which causes one of the opponent's Pokemon to flinch. And because Smeargle often holds Focus Sash, if you target the Pokemon that is the Smeargle counter, like if it has like a taunt Pokemon, if you have like taunt Thundurus, for example, and you don't have you don't have Protect on your Thundurus and you don't have Lumberry, and they go Fake Out Dark Void, it's really hard to stop. So Kangaskhan is another partner. And we also saw recently Aaron Zeng using Smeargle with Bronzong to set up his Trick Room mode. He used Crafty Shield to block Taunt, and once in Trick Room, he was able to use his bulky, slow Smeargle to Dark Void the opponent and set up for his sweeper. So that's definitely another option. We also saw a team at one point where, and I believe it was 6-point stars, but I'm not, or 5-point stars, sorry, not 6-point stars. But I'm not entirely positive, but there was definitely a team with Smeargle and Cresselia using a Trick Room mode and Crafty Shield. It was one of the first uses of Crafty Shield that I saw. So, yeah, these are all of Smeargle's partners these are some of the most common Smeargle partners. Of course, you can technically lead Smeargle with anything in your team, but these are the ones that I think are at least the most threatening, as well as some of the most common. So, going on, I'm just going to talk about some general counters when you're team building, right? So when you're looking at beating Smeargle, and I've bolded the ones that I think are more important and more consistent, you're going to want to look at things like speed, right? Because the fact that Smeargle holds Focus Sash, if you lack a Pokemon that can hit it twice in one attack, like Kangaskhan, having 2 Pokemon that can outspeed it is also very good. So having Pokemon that just have high base speed and can put on pressure is really, really important because you can attack Smeargle before it gets the opportunity to Dark Void. Also, Lumberry is really nice. It gives you a little bit of insurance versus Smeargle. I tried Lumberry and Moongus at one point because I was weak to Smeargle on a team. And yeah, Lumberry is it's a good item. It lets you deal status in general. It helps you versus Pokemon like a Moongus and Thundurus. So the thing is, when you're talking about beating Smeargle, you don't want to improve your Smeargle matchup to the point where you weaken everything else. So having things like speed and Lumberry and taunt and double targeting, these things that I've bolded, I think they're really important because they're things that you want in your team in general, and they don't weaken your matchup versus other things. Whereas if you run like Safeguard, you're really only improving your Smeargle matchup with a few other niche things. But yeah, that's something. Taunt is really good versus Smeargle. It helps. So it's good and it's bad because it stops Smeargle from doing the Smeargle stuff, but it doesn't stop Smeargle necessarily from using Follow Me and setting up a Xerneas. So when you're using Taunt, it's nice insurance. It's nice late game versus Smeargle when it's not, because oftentimes when Smeargle is being used to set up, it's very early game, and so it's nice to have in general. Taunt is a great move. Taunt is a move that's been seen forever in VGC. It's like a phenomenal move. But when you're using Taunt, you have to be aware. It's not like I have Taunt, therefore I beat Smeargle, because you can stop Smeargle, but you might Smeargle could go fake out that turn, or could what really is worrying with Taunt is the ability to set up Xerneas. So yeah, that's something with Taunt. Double targeting is another thing. So double targeting is, like I said, it comes with speed. You can also use priority, but just taking care of Smeargle before it gets the opportunity to do too much. And then I have on here Safeguard, Magic Coat, and Magic Bounce, which are all technically options. Magic Coat is not consistent. I wouldn't recommend it, but it can work on certain teams, and it can work for certain players. It can reflect back Dark Voids, but that's just it's too much of a mind game for me to personally recommend. So these are all other options. There's also stuff like Double Kick and Skydrop, which is ends redirection and lets you kind of dance around Smeargle a little bit better, but for the most part I wouldn't recommend those options. So yeah, so now let's talk about specific counters. So the number one Smeargle counter in my opinion at the moment is Crobat, because Crobat has a really nice combination of things that stop Smeargle and stop Smeargle plus opponent Pokemon that is commonly used with Smeargle. So Crobat's Inner Focus stops Kangaskhan from using Fake Out on it. It gives it more insurance. You can't just Fake Out and Dark Void versus Crobat because it has Taunt and it has Lumberry. Crobat is also a solid Pokemon because it's not bad in VGC16. It has Tailwind and Super Fang, which are both really, really nice. And it resists Fairy type, so that's also really important because Crobat can Taunt versus Smeargle turn 1 and then protect your partner in Tailwind turn 2 to make sure that Xerneas' speed advantage isn't permanent. So I think Crobat, when I have a team that's really weak to Smeargle and I feel like I don't really need the last slot, I'm really tempted to add Crobat. So people feel differently about Crobat. I haven't used it enough to really get a strong opinion on it. I don't know if it's the best Pokemon ever, but it definitely fulfills a niche role, and it has a lot of options. There are other options as well, like Whirlwind and Haze, which are really good versus Xerneas, for example. Whirlwind not as much, but Haze definitely. So yeah, Crobat's a solid Pokemon, and it's definitely a really, really, if you just I need a Pokemon, and all I care is that I want it to beat Smeargle, I don't care about anything else, I would definitely say Crobat. The next Pokemon is a Pokemon that's really strong overall. Obviously, Kangaskhan is kind of queen of the format, or it was last year. I wouldn't say so much this year, but yeah, Kangaskhan's Parental Bond ability allows it to attack twice in one hit, which you're okay, big deal, Parental Bond, whatever. So the thing is that the fact that Parental Bond is important is because it can OHKO Smeargle around its focus sash. So being able to take out Smeargle in one hit and not have to waste 2 can be really nice, especially if you have Kangaskhan plus a slower Steel type Pokemon versus Xerneas, or yeah, I don't know. It's just it's a solid Pokemon. It's also nice because Kangaskhan is a Pokemon that your team's probably not going to suffer if you add Kangaskhan. Kangaskhan is it's just it's such a good Pokemon that if you have it on your team, you're not really losing that much, and it also gives you kind of a soft check to Smeargle. I would definitely say Kangaskhan's more of a soft check, but if you build your team correctly, you can use Kangaskhan a little bit more as a hard counter depending on the rest of your team. I would like to say though that Kangaskhan does not necessarily have a very good matchup against Choice Scarf Smeargle, so that's something you have to watch out for, definitely. And so that's just something to keep in mind, because Choice Scarf Smeargle can Dark Void, although you can fake it out, it's still gonna have the speed advantage at the next turn. So Choice Scarf Smeargle not great. That's why I would say Crobat is like a really solid Smeargle counter, is because the Lumberry set allows you to kind of dance around Choice Scarf Smeargle as well as Mental Herb Smeargle as well as Focus Sash Smeargle. So, but I would still say Kangaskhan's a really solid option, and also the fact that there's a fake out to apply pressure to the partner of Smeargle, especially that first turn, can be very nice. So Kangaskhan's a really solid Pokemon, and it's good versus Smeargle. The last specific Pokemon I'm going to talk about is Thundurus. The Prankster Taunt that it has stops a lot of Smeargle's options, basically everything that isn't fake out. You need to watch out for, like I said, fake out, but also Mental Herb, because it's not super common and I wouldn't expect it a lot, but Mental Herb Smeargle can really ruin your day if you're counting on Taunt to stop it. You can also run Skydrop on Thundurus. That's like a solid option to beat Smeargle, but not a solid option versus everything else, because I learned that things are often too heavy to Skydrop, especially in VGC16. So I would like to note that if you're going to run Thundurus, I would definitely recommend, if you're going to have Taunt and you're trying to beat Smeargle, I would recommend Protect, because that turn 1 fake out from Smeargle or Smeargle's partner is really threatening. Thundurus is solid as a taunt Pokemon, but it doesn't necessarily stop the Smeargle plus Xerneas lead. So Thundurus is really good if you can conserve it, if they have Smeargle but not Xerneas, for example. But it doesn't. If you're going to use Thundurus to beat Xerneas, if you're going to beat Thundurus to beat Smeargle Xerneas, you need something else that can really put on the pressure on Smeargle, because it's definitely susceptible to the GMNC Smeargle lead, or the Smeargle Xerneas lead with the GMNC goal. But the thing is, this is another Pokemon where it's a soft counter, where Taunt and Fast Thunderbolt and Thunder Waving partners is all very good versus Smeargle, but it's also it's just Thundurus is a phenomenal Pokemon, and it's usable in a lot more matchups. So kind of something that I touched on here and I haven't written about, but I'm just going to talk about it anyway, is that when you're trying to improve your matchup versus Smeargle, it's really important to not weaken your matchup versus other things. So yeah, you can run stuff that's really specific to Smeargle and just really improves your matchup, so you have a 100-0 matchup versus Smeargle, but because VGC is bring 6 pick 4, they don't even have to bring Smeargle. So you don't want to weaken your team to other threats. I think I've already touched on this a little bit, but you don't want to weaken your team to other threats just to improve your Smeargle matchup. You want your team to be overall solid and also be able to handle Smeargle. It's nice to have a team, if you can, that won't lose to an evasion boost, because that will happen occasionally. Like the Spiky Shield turn 1 and evasion boost on the Moody in between turns, and that can just be really annoying. So Thundurus, definitely a solid Pokemon in a ton of matchups. I'm a big fan of Thundurus. It's really tough to play against, and yes, I don't know, a solid Pokemon. So I also want to talk a bit about best of 1 versus best of 3, because that's really important when you're thinking about Smeargle. Smeargle's a bit easier to handle in best of 3, because once you start figuring out its moves and its item, if you know it's Focus Sash versus Mental Herb versus Choice Scarf, those are the things that can kind of, not Focus Sash so much, but Choice Scarf and Mental Herb are things I think that can take a game pretty easily, but have more of trouble winning a set. So knowing the format of the tournament that you're playing in, and playing safer in best of 1, being okay, he led Talonflame Smeargle and I have Kangaskhan, he's probably gonna quick guard Dark Void and he might be Choice Scarf, stuff like that is definitely good to keep in mind. You can afford to play a little riskier in best of 3, or you can afford to make a little, you can afford to guess wrong more in best of 3, I guess I should say. You can afford to taunt a Mental Herb Smeargle or return while the Smeargle outspeeds you with Choice Scarf. But in best of 1, you should. It's not if you really care about beating Smeargle, you should have some answers Pokemon like Crobat and Thundurus and Kangaskhan. Really Pokemon that just have a solid game plan versus Smeargle, so that you don't end up getting caught off guard by something unorthodox. I also put on here Schrodinger's cat theory. I'm gonna make a separate video about that. That's coming soon, because I want to I'm thinking about making a series about how to play a best of 3, and it's too much to do in one video because there's a lot that goes into it. So we'll touch on that later. Just keep that in mind for a later video. So other options that I have are Espeon. Randy Quall used Espeon to win the Oregon Regionals, I believe, a couple weeks ago. And Espeon, I don't think is a Pokemon you want in most matchups, but he felt that he could afford to have a Pokemon that was just specifically good against Smeargle and nothing else. So these are all options that, Espeon, Double Kick, Worry Seed, and Insomnia, I don't recommend them, honestly. I've seen people use them. I think they can work in some very specific situations on very specific teams, but for the most part, they're not ideal, they're not optimal. The last thing is Substitute. So I ran Substitute on my Salamence because at Florida Regionals, because I was definitely weak to Smeargle, and I wanted something. I had like a game plan versus Smeargle's Xerneas lead that was like a pretty threatening lead against my team, and Substitute helped it a lot. But having Substitute on things faster than Smeargle, if they're going to be going the Dark Void route, can really improve your matchup. It's something that I don't think is extremely utilized right now, and I understand why, because it's hard to use Substitute Pokemon when the format is like so high power. Like it's like Substitute. It doesn't matter if you're Salamence Resist, Eruption, or Water Spout, or even Origin Pulse. Like that Substitute is not going to be making it through the turn. So Substitute's an option. It's not super consistent right now, I don't think, but it's definitely something to keep in mind. And there are other options as well that I haven't touched on. I just wanted to make like a quick intro to beating Smeargle video. But yeah, if you guys liked what you saw here, make sure to leave a like. Make sure to mention in the comments if you have other ideas. Because I'd love to hear them. And yeah, I'm thinking about doing this with other Pokemon. If you're interested, if there's other like top threats you'd like to see, like counters to both Orthodox and Unorthodox, that we can definitely explore that. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you soon.